Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and completely dismantle what we think we know about human survival in the ancient world. When we picture our ancestors, it's so easy to fall into this trap of imagining them with some, I don't know, magical, long-lost biological advantage. But the reality of how they actually survived the most brutal, freezing conditions on Earth, it's infinitely more fascinating, and honestly incredibly relevant to how we operate today.
Just picture this for a second. Place yourself in a freezing landscape where certainty is just impossible. You have absolutely none of the modern safety nets we take for granted today. No smartphone to call for help, no weather app to predict the blizzard, no hospital, literally nothing. One single wrong decision out there, just a slight miscalculation, could instantly cost you your food, your social support, or your life. Yet somehow, generation after generation, they made it. So, how did they do it?
Well, first off, we have to forget the whole Hollywood myth of the gritty, lone survivor battling nature all by themselves. What's really interesting here is how the historical reality totally shatters that solitary tough guy image. Real human strength was our cooperative reality. Our ancestors survived because they divided the tasks. They shared the massive risks of the landscape, they taught each other, and they supported the folks who couldn't contribute equally every single day. The lone wolf doesn't survive a prehistoric winter. The pack does.
So how did they actually combat the cold? Survival wasn't just one secret trick, right? It wasn't like they just invented fire and called it a day. It was this deeply layered system of physical protection. We're talking smart shelter choices, specific bedding, strategically layered hides to trap dead air, fire, and shared body heat. By combining these layers, preparation rapidly reduced dangerous heat loss. They didn't need a textbook on thermodynamics. They simply noticed what worked and built a system around it.
And this brings us to something absolutely crucial: how human intelligence turned abstract survival into a concrete, repeatable system. It's basically a three-step cognitive evolution. First, observation. Someone notices a certain spot is safer from the wind. Second, memory, remembering that outcome for the next storm. But the real game changer is step 3, teaching. By sharing the plan, multiple minds could join around one single decision. That meant the next generation didn't have to start from scratch with just basic instincts. They began with a serious, inherited survival manual.
There's this quote I absolutely love that totally reframes how we look at heroism. Modern stories celebrate courage when crisis, but preparation usually creates the conditions in which courage has a chance to matter. Think about that. We really have to recognize that ancient survival was frequently decided way before the most dramatic moment. It wasn't always some epic, last-minute battle against a predator. Usually it was about small, unheroic, everyday choices, like conserving energy or deciding to change direction early before a storm even hit.
Right. And because conditions were so wild and unpredictable, rigid behavior was literally a fatal trap. They had to be incredibly flexible. Instead of relying on one single thing, they looked for overlapping survival signals: animal tracks, weather shifts, vegetation, sounds, even social reputation and remembered stories. If one clue was off but everything else pointed the same way, you had a solid basis for action. They had to read these overlapping clues to update the strategy the exact second the evidence changed. Flexibility was everything.
Let's shift gears to the social layer, because this is where the survival system gets incredibly sophisticated. Trust wasn't just, blind kindness. It was a calculated survival investment managed through memory and social consequences. Sharing half your hunted meat today meant that same person might repair your spear or warn you of danger tomorrow. Your reputation was absolutely everything out there.
So here is the real kicker. A lesson stored in just one person's brain, that could tragically die with them. If the only elder who knows where the winter water source is passes away, the entire group is in serious trouble. That makes culture, our shared traditions, stories, and knowledge, the ultimate data storage mechanism for human survival. It's literally survival memory.
And this perfectly explains the real underlying function of ancient rituals and customs. Look, even if their explanations of nature were wildly inaccurate, like blaming a blizzard on angry spirits, these shared practices were absolutely vital. A ritual coordinated their timing, reduced internal arguments, and marked out clear social obligations. It seamlessly blended spiritual meaning with practical behavior. Basically, they turned life-saving tactics into customs that were totally impossible to forget.
Okay, but what happens when all that preparation just isn't enough? What happens when the first plan completely falls apart? This is the ultimate test of their resilience and honestly of ours today. The group suddenly has to weigh the massive cost of stubbornly pushing forward against the cost of pivoting to something new. Pride offers absolutely zero survival benefit if it traps you inside a failing strategy. Now, obviously, our modern environment is a bit different. I mean, most of us aren't tracking mammoths through the snow, but there's a massive modern echo to all of this. Our brains are wired the exact same way. We still survive and thrive through flexibility, relationships, and layered protection. We have to gather reliable information early, keep our alternatives open, and above all, never, ever confuse isolation with actual strength. The incredible reality of ancient survival is really about understanding how multiple, modest advantages combine in rapid succession. It isn't about one giant heroic leap. It starts with just one safer choice, like deciding to build a shelter just a few feet further out of the wind. Then, you add to that safer choice the immense power of one remembered lesson, passed down through the group to keep you from repeating past mistakes. And you anchor the whole shebang with one reliable relationship, someone you can truly depend on to pull you up when you stumble in the snow. Sure, these details might look like tiny drops in the bucket in isolation, right? But stacked together into a system, they are the very things that change the outcome of an entire crisis. They are the exact building blocks that kept humanity alive against impossible odds. Which leaves us with a pretty massive question to ask ourselves today about our own modern resilience. When the pressure peaks and that first plan inevitably fails, do you have another option? And just as importantly, do you have people with whom you can share the burden? Because as the ancients proved time and time again, that is how we truly survive. Thanks for hanging out for this explainer. We'll see you next time.